It's that time again, that time when we step into the hallowed halls of Washington, D.C., the stalls, if you will. We have a gentleman here today that wants to go into those stalls and see if there's any crapo he can shovel out. We're your hosts, Greg, Ken, and Chris, and this is Three Pastors Walk Into a Bar. Actually, it's just me today. Ken has decided he wants to be on vacation, and Greg is sick with the sinus infection. So pray for Ken, pray for Greg, pray for Ken too. They're traveling. So yeah, it's just me, and we are pleased today to be joined by Scott Cleveland. How you doing, man?
Hey, I'm doing great. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me, Chris.
Oh man, I really appreciate you coming in and doing this. It's always a unique experience to meet you guys, you know, because
Sure.
One of the things that we like to do on this show is just address the fact that all these guys that are running, all these people that are running for office, they're just people. You know, I mean, I think we get this idea that they're not people, that they're politicians,
right.
But in reality, all these guys, you guys, you have a family, you have a life, it's
Yep.
like, so why don't we start by doing this, Mr. Scott Cleveland, who is running for the Senate seat that Mike Crapo is currently holding, which hence the intro.
Yes. I hear that a lot when I talk to people.
His name is, you have to admit, his name is unfortunate because it lends itself to many jokes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I feel for him.
Yeah.
I really do. I really do.
There's a wealth of material there, that's for sure.
Yeah, no doubt.
So you're hoping to get in there on the general election as an independent,
Right.
November 8th.
Absolutely. So again, my name is Scott Cleveland.
Mm-hmm.
My friends call me O, like, oh yeah, oh my God. Oh,
Really?
Oh no, oh yeah, oh, you can't say that.
Is that because Cleveland is in Ohio?
No, my family is originally from Ohio, but I was born in New Mexico. But my dad was from Ohio, and I still have family there. My father-in-law was from Ohio. But my nickname just came out of me being the boss. I've always been a leader, the owner, the manager, what have you. Usually when I lay out the plan for the troops, here's what we're going to do. It's met with one of 5 responses. Oh, yeah. Oh, no.
Oh, no.
My God. Oh, you can't do that. Or oh, crap, or one of those. So
that actually makes a lot of sense.
Kind of stuck. And then I do a little political smack talking on the radio down in the Treasure Valley.
Oh, nice.
With a friend of mine, Kevin. And when I'm doing that, typically I'd called in for the last 13, 14 years or so as O from Eagle. Because that's where we live. I just decided, let's just roll that right into the campaign and go off of that name recognition.
That's fun.
From Eagle. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. That's good. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, I'm a regular guy. I'm a business owner. I've been in the financial services business for the last 30 years. I'm self-employed. I still have a little office there in Eagle. And I'm just a hardworking guy. I've been married faithfully to the same woman for the last 33 years.
Amen to that.
Thank you. And I'm politically active. I started a little patriot group down in the valley a couple years ago. And my candidacy for this office, when I decided to run, was kind of born out of my little patriot group there. It's called the Treasure Valley Council of Patriots. TV COP is the acronym.
TV COP.
TV COP, yeah. It rolls right off the tongue. Let's see, what else about me?
You have an affinity for naming.
Yes,
obviously.
yeah, I do. I do. I have a talent for it. Everybody deserves a good nickname, right?
Right.
That's it. So I'm 61 years old. I've never held office, but I am resolved to make a difference. I see what's going on in the world and in Washington, D.C., and the lack of leadership, and I'm sickened by it. And after a period of time of research and prayer and consultation, I decided, hey, I am both capable and willing to make a difference in this country, and I'm blessed in that regard that I have the freedom of schedule to do that. So last November 6th, I decided to make the run, and I'd be happy to tell you a little bit more about that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
We want to talk about all that. I mean, you got a lot of information on your material,
Mm-hmm.
and you have like 3 key messages that you promote a lot. The first one is that America is still great but off track.
Definitely.
Yeah, what I know that most of our viewers for sure would agree with that sentiment.
Sure.
But do you have any like specific areas that you like think about when you think this is something that we could take care of, that we could straighten out? Because sometimes when you look at like the federal government and you see all the things that are wrong with it, the solution seems so insurmountable, like with education, like the federal education system, I mean, it's like, where do you even begin? So like what do you think like you would focus on if you had the opportunity?
Well, it's bad news, good news. The bad news is we have a lot of problems, and many of those problems, Chris, are self-inflicted.
Yeah.
By our current administration and some of the predecessors. We can go back all the way to the Obama administration or earlier, and it's very sad to see the state of affairs when these problems that we're dealing with as regular average Americans were preventable. They're avoidable.
Yeah.
And yet the border invasion at the southern border. I'm from New Mexico, as I mentioned.
Yeah, you're intimately familiar with that.
Yeah, that is deliberate. It's avoidable. And yet that's what's going on. 200,000 invaders into our country, unvetted on a monthly basis.
Yeah.
That is a violation of their oath of office and the Constitution, which they're doing on a daily basis. That's not the only example. Our energy independence is another example. You look at where we were 2 years ago as a country. Mm-hmm. We were a net exporter of our energy, natural resources, and now we're buying oil and energy from countries that hate us, that want to kill us.
Yeah.
And then Ding Dong Joe, he takes some of our strategic reserves, our emergency reserves, and sells them to China. It just doesn't make any sense.
That was pretty gross.
And these are problems that can be fixed. None of them are quick fixes.
Yeah.
First, we have to take the House and the Senate back. That'll slow down the Biden administration, and then we need to replace the commander-in-thief, is what I call Joe Biden, or whatever you want to call him. Right? I'm sorry. He's just doing a horrible job. It's deliberate, and that's just the way it is.
Yeah, but he's harmless, Scott. Old Grandpa Joe.
Yeah, well.
Old Grandpa Joe, just up there, just kind of hanging out.
Yeah.
He's harmless, Scott. Come on.
He's harmless for about the next 78 days or so till the midterms.
Yeah.
I have a theory about what they're going to do to him. I think that the Democrats, there is a red wave coming, a conservative wave.
Mm-hmm.
I think that he is going to be made the scapegoat for their losses in Congress. Yeah. And shortly thereafter, you're going to see a move to replace Joe Biden and put in the number 2.
Yeah, Kamala.
That's even scarier.
Or Kamala.
Yeah, I'm scared of all of it. Yeah. But you know what? That's the way it is. But I don't think he's going to serve out all 4 years of his term the way that things are going. But I could be wrong about that.
I don't see how he cognitively could do that.
No,
there's just no way.
Willingly or unwillingly, I think they're going to say, Joe, it's time to go out to pasture, so to speak.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it is, and part of that massive problem is the reckless spending. I think the last I checked, Biden was up to like $4 trillion in 18 months, something like that.
It's just ridiculous, and this out of control reckless spending is a problem. We're at $30.5 trillion and counting, and my opponent, Senator Crapo, I'll get to the list, but that brings one up right there. While Senator Crapo has been in office in Washington, our national debt has increased 660% on his watch. Both he and Jim Risch, our other senator, they both voted last summer on August 10th for the massive $1.25 trillion green energy bill, mislabeled as infrastructure. It had very little to do with infrastructure, and only a handful of Republicans switched jerseys and started voting with Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, and both Mike Crapo and Jim Risch were on that list. And that is a betrayal of the voters of Idaho. I didn't send him there to start doing that.
Yeah. Do you think that there's a stomach in the legislature to start doing something about the bills having a lot of this pork attached to it? Because that seems to be a big part of the problem. It's like you send these things through like a infrastructure bill, and then attached to the infrastructure bill, you have, X, Y, Z, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then before you know it, you got an 800-page bill.
Yeah.
It really has nothing to do with what it's labeled.
Sure.
You think there's a stomach to get that to where like Idaho is? It's like one bill has one purpose.
Yeah, I'd like to see that happen. That's not an easy fix, but certainly when I'm elected to Congress, if there's bad things in the bill along with the goodies, if there's bad things in there, my answer is going to be no every single time, because you just can't have the kind of behavior happening, the spending, just the bad ideas in general for the average American. And a bill that you described as 800 pages, now they're 1,600 pages or longer. Yeah. They print them at 10 o'clock at night, and you're supposed to vote on them the next morning at 11 o'clock. You haven't had a chance to evaluate it or research that.
It's the old Nancy Pelosi thing. You got to pass it to see what's in it. Right?
Yeah, I'm having none of that, Chris. And I don't care if it's the Republicans trying to twist my independent arm or the Democrats. The answer is going to be no when it comes up to that, because I am running as an independent conservative. That's very important.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's pretty gross up there, It's like, and they all play that game, It gets the regular person just really frustrated with the whole thing, you know. It's like one of the things that comes up a lot in a lot of our conversations and podcasts with a lot of the people that we talk to, especially state representatives. They're just like, our chances of fixing something at the federal level are almost nil. We need to focus on our state sovereignty. Yeah. And there's something to be said for that, but you have a different vision, obviously. You really think that you can go in and make an impact in the federal government. Sure.
Well, the framers of our country were brilliant men, and they broke it into three branches. Obviously, the legislative branch is very, very important. And if you look at our current setup in Congress, you have about 50 Republicans and about 50 Democrats, give or take. And the votes on everything that come across are very close now, 49-51, 50-50 sometimes. So even though I might be one little old senator from the state of Idaho, the beautiful gem state, one senator has the same amount of voting power as somebody in Los Angeles or New York City or anywhere else for that matter. And it's very, very important that we elect conservatives, true conservatives, to serve in these roles instead of the blue Republicans that are serving in those roles. And you can't count on them anymore. There was a time back in Crapo's career where he was pretty solid, and you could count on him to do the right thing and be truly conservative. Sadly, over a 40-year period, 40 years in office, he's drifted off, and you can't count on him anymore.
Do you think the longer that you sit there, the more that you get manipulated, and you maybe not even realize it?
Oh, without question. Yeah. Without question. If you look at Senator Crapo's federal election campaign finance reports, you will notice, if you filter it out, 98% of his funding comes from outside of Idaho. A full 98%.
Wow.
It's big pharma, big tech, Pfizer, Facebook, Google, and almost no money from regular Idahoans. So where does his loyalty lie? I think that there's your answer right there.
Yeah, that's true. Just follow the money. Mm-hmm. Now, one of your other three key messages is our rights come from God, not government. And as a supporter of our constitutional republic, I really appreciate that phraseology.
Sure.
And the rights of the individual as it's laid out in the Constitution.
Yeah. Our founders were Christian. We were a Christian nation. We still are a Christian nation. And our rights aren't granted to us by government, federal or state for that matter. They come from God.
Yeah. Now, that brings up an interesting question, because like a lot of times when people say that our nation is a Christian nation and that our country was founded by Christians, and that there's this alarm bell that goes off for people that lean left, that says Christo-fascist right off the bat. There is a lot of people on the left that believe that there is a movement of Christians that desire a Christo-fascist theocracy. What would you say to a person like that to assure them that you're not really looking for a theocracy? Because I don't think you are. I mean, if you are a supporter of the Republic and you are a supporter of the Constitution, then there's no way that you could be a supporter of a theocracy.
Well, I think the mainstream media is controlled by 6 corporations. Mm-hmm. And so if you're a conservative and you have conservative values, and maybe you're a Christian, maybe you're not, but you're a family values type of person, you are going to be smeared and painted in the media as some sort of a nut job, nationalist, racist, bigot, homophobe, right on down the list. And that is just so tired and worn out that it has very little meaning anymore. We have to stick to our belief systems and not bend to the pressures of the corporate media, no matter how strong they may be. Yeah. That's where having a backbone comes in pretty handy.
Yeah. But see, I'm talking like more philosophically, so if you are a supporter of the Republic, and let me just throw a couple of things at you, like
sure.
Abortion, for instance. You're anti-abortion. I've read the material.
Yes.
And would you consider yourself to be of the abolitionist vein or of the kind of life of the mother kind of vein? No. Or like where do you place yourself at?
I would put myself in the abolitionist column. I'm not afraid to say that. And the reason I'm there is, when everybody wants to start making exceptions, that's where you start getting into a bunch of gray areas. Yeah. And, my personal belief is this, whether somebody agrees with it or not, is, they say, well, what about this case, in the case of the mother's life is in danger, or, a rape victim and so on. Well, in the case of the mother's life being in danger, how many times, Chris, in your life do you know of a woman that has died from being pregnant? That was the only reason she died, from being pregnant. So there may be an exception out there. It may be a rarity, but it is such a small percentage that I don't want to start making those exceptions and distinctions.
Yeah.
And same thing with a rape. Okay, all right, I can understand that. Let's find a way to have that child adopted. If necessary.
Yeah. No, I get it, and I agree with you on most of those points. I think that in my opinion, I like. Have you read Scott Herndon's bill for the abortion Act? Scott Herndon wrote a bill. And I think Heather Scott's going to put it through again, but it basically states that abortion is illegal, and the only exception is that if the intention is to save the life of the mother, that's the only exception in the bill, right? And is it from that abolitionist viewpoint? I guess what's happening is you're thinking that the doctor's going to make a decision. In the worst case, let's say we're just talking about 0.01% of things, right? Like the chances of this happening are very slim, but the chance is there. Yeah. So you're a doctor, you're looking at this woman, and you have a choice to make. You can either save the life of the mother or you can save the life of the baby. Either way you go, you're looking at a potential malpractice suit. Either way you go, you might be going to court. So do you even make that decision, or you back off, and does that cause problems? I know that's a hypothetical, massive hypothetical, but I think it's important that people understand that there's nuances there, and how do we deal with those?
I understand that. I'm sticking with my original plan.
Right.
I'm not going to be okay with somebody killing an innocent child under any circumstances, and that's just the way it is. And I know that certain people are not going to agree with that, and that's okay. Right. We're in a country where we don't have to agree on everything.
That's good. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, and I there are a lot of different little things out there that people are going to throw and to try and figure out what's going on with that. Yeah. Another one is like gay marriage, for instance.
Right.
If I'm not mistaken, now correct me if I'm wrong, but you are opposed to homosexuality, but you're not necessarily opposed to gay marriage.
Yeah, I have a lot of Christian friends. I'm a Christian myself, of course, and I know what the Bible has to say about homosexuality. I get all of that. But in this modern world that we live in, I honestly don't care, Chris, if there are two gay, adult, consenting people, what they do in their bedroom, or if they want to have the legal protection of marriage. That doesn't bother me greatly. Now, I'll draw the line right there, because then you get into the the rest of the alphabet soup, LGBTQ plus, and so on. I draw the line when they start trying to ram their lifestyle down our throat. Gay pride, we don't need to have a month. They don't need a special lane on the freeway. There's nothing special about a gay person. I think they should just be left alone, but they shouldn't be ramming it down everyone else's throats. And they do. All corporate media does. They're woke.
Yeah.
Then it trickles down into the school systems. You got men going into the little girl's bathroom. So there's never an end to it. And I get that. And I'm for traditional family values.
Mm-hmm.
But I got to be honest. I have a gay family member, and I've worked in Fortune 100 companies around gay people, and as long as they're not trying to push their agenda and ask for special favors, I just don't care about it. I'm willing to say, you know what, that's their choice.
Yeah.
And that angers some Christian friends, but you know what? You don't have to bat 1,000 to be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah. And I think that's the key. I mean, it's like everybody's got a little bit of a different slant on the way that they think about things. The important thing is having a dialogue about it to be able to discuss those things, because if you can't have a dialogue about it, which seems to be the biggest problem these days, is that you just can't have a dialogue about stuff.
How about being a good person and your sexuality kind of comes after the fact?
Yeah, I mean, who cares who you like to sleep with?
I don't care.
Yeah,
really
I mean, just go do your thing. Yeah. And I tend to agree with you on that. I mean, I'm not neither for nor against gay marriage. I mean, to me, if you have a guy that likes guys and he wants to get married to a guy, then go get married to a guy. Well, right. My problem is when you have a guy who imagines that he's a woman and then wants to marry a guy, and then you start talking it. Then you have to start having a conversation about mental health, because that's an issue.
Well, I wanted to throw in one more thing on the gay marriage discussion. To me, that issue should not have been decided at a federal level by the Supreme Court by people in black robes that were not elected to those positions. It's obviously not in the Constitution, so anything not in the Constitution is supposed
relegated
to fall back
into
the states.
Yeah.
And yet the issue of gay marriage was not decided that way. So you see an inconsistency from the Supreme Court. That it should have absolutely been decided by a state by state legislature body, and yet it wasn't. And so I think that's a mistake. But again, that's one that they took on, and I don't think they should have made that the law of the land in all 50 states, because those are not elected officials. They don't create legislation, and yet they acted in that role, and I think that's a mistake.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and maybe we have a Supreme Court now that has enough stomach to start passing some stuff down to the states, like Roe v. Wade.
Yeah,
that was a massive step, man.
Absolutely.
For those guys to step up to that and say, hey, look, this is a state issue. This isn't a federal issue. We're not going to deal with it. Right. You guys figure it out.
Yeah, exactly.
That was a massive step, man. And so, those people that say that Trump didn't accomplish anything in his term, I mean, look at that. That's pretty impressive.
I think he accomplished a lot, and especially when you contrast it to the state of affairs in our country right now.
Yeah, for sure.
If that's not a compare and contrast scenario, I don't know what is.
So you're in a strange minority, Scott. You are.
I've been called worse than strange, Chris.
You're in a strange minority of people who support congressional term limits.
I am, yeah. So in the Articles of Federation, when our framers were drawing up how this country was going to work, the original articles had term limits for the members of Congress built into it.
Right.
And 7 years later, when they ratified the United States Constitution, guess what? They took it out. They took it out. They didn't want to vote themselves out of a job.
Yeah.
And we are paying the price for that now some 240 years later.
Yeah, some of those guys have been in there 30, 40 years.
Well, Joe Biden, 50 years himself. Yeah. And it's ridiculous. I mean, that is not what the framers had in mind. You were supposed to go serve your term or two and then go get back to your business or go get on with your life. Now, that's not an easy fix, because you're talking about one of two ways to get there. An amendment to the Constitution, which Congress is never going to vote for that, just like the original group didn't.
Yeah, which is what the Convention of States, guys, is really all about.
Yeah, so speaking of Convention of States, it's misconstrued, so I'd like to address it head on.
Sure.
So the Convention of States is part of our Constitution. It is written into our founding. Mm-hmm. So it's not some harebrained idea. The founders had that in mind. And what is the purpose of it? Well, The underlying purpose of it is if the federal government gets too much power and starts acting in a tyrannical fashion, which this one certainly is.
Yeah, for sure.
It is a measure built in to give the states, the individual states, relief and a mechanism, if you will, to go back and claw that power back away from the tyrants and give it back to the people in the individual states.
Right.
So it's in there. Now, the standard is very high. You have to have two-thirds state legislative bodies calling for a convention of states. So that's a bunch.
Yeah.
Right now, I think that number's 35. If my limited math skills check out,
they were at 34.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And now I think the current count is 18 or 19.
18 or 19. Yeah.
So it's a long way to go. But my point is, it's a very, very high standard. And if they called a convention of states, let's say, for example, that term limits was their number one issue, and that's what they wanted to change and put in. And they passed it as a body. Then there's a slightly higher standard for it actually to become the law of the land and part of our Constitution, and that is I think it goes up to 38 states, like a 70% total.
Supermajority. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Now, if you think about our country and the mix and the red states and the blue states and so on, that is a very, very high standard to make such a radical, important change, and it should be. So the idea is right. I don't have a problem with it philosophically, but it is going to take a long, long time to get there. That is not going to happen anytime soon.
A massive undertaking.
So what is the shorter term remedy is to vote these criminals and crooks that you don't like out of office. That's why I'm running. Now, the detractors of Convention of States, they misconstrue the argument. People that are opponents of the Convention of States make it sound like these are a bunch of tinfoil hat people, extremists, and they want to completely throw out our entire form and structure of government and start with a blank yellow pad, a new piece of paper, and redraw how America works from scratch, which is not the case at all.
Not even possible. Yeah.
That's how they construe it, and that's why they poo-poo it. I think we would benefit from having term limits. There's no reason for somebody to be in Washington for 20, 30, 40 years. There's no reason in the world for that.
Yeah. I mean, it would take you probably half of one term just to settle into what's going on over there at this point.
Well, I could see myself serving one term. 6-year term is reasonable. And then if I'm doing a good job and the people want to send me back and I'm still digging the job, I might go another one. But then that's it. It's time to go get on.
You should go back home.
Yeah, go get on with life.
Live under the laws that you created.
Yep. And they don't do that. They don't plan to do that anytime soon.
Yeah. It's refreshing to hear, because a lot of even politicians, even a lot of like deep conservatives that I've talked to tend to be opponents of term limits because of the whole experience kind of argument. You know, it's like you get somebody that's good in there and they're doing a really good job, you're kind of cutting your own arm off, but like you said, I mean, it's like guys like Crapo, they get in there. Crapo, I guess is what his actual name is. But you get in there and you start off really good, and then it just over time. Oh. I don't think that they intend to be that way. I think just over time, you just change. Yeah. You get kind of part of that culture, and sociologically, you just it alters you.
So, they spend less and less time here. In fact, Mike Crapo doesn't even live in Idaho. Do you know that?
Mm-mm.
Well, Mike Crapo doesn't spend any time in Idaho. I suppose that for legal reasons and campaign finance issues, he has an apartment somewhere in Boise, Idaho. But I can tell you this for a fact. I've been traveling all over the state for months on end. And Mike Crapo does not live in Idaho any more than Liz Cheney lives in Wyoming. And I was in Idaho Falls about 6 weeks ago speaking to a group of people. He's supposedly from Idaho Falls.
Right.
And I'm up there doing my thing from the podium, and I make this declaration that, Mike Crapo doesn't even live in Idaho. And this lady's hand in the audience goes up, and I said, "Yes, ma'am." She says, "Well, he's my neighbor." I said, "Oh, well, maybe I need to be corrected. Should I stand corrected? How often do you see the good Senator Crapo since he's your neighbor?" She goes, "I've never once seen him." Never once. I said, "Okay, all right."
Well, there you go.
There you go. Yeah. I promise you'll never run into the guy at a grocery store or a gas station. He spends the great deal of his time in Washington when he's on duty, which he's required to.
Yeah.
A great deal of time in Washington when he's off duty. And then I think his family, kids and grandkids, wife spent a majority of their time down in Utah. Nothing wrong with that. Love Utah.
Yep.
But he spends almost no time. Now, every 6 years, he'll start to come around. In fact, he's coming up here to Post Falls to do a little suck up with the veterans group.
Mm-hmm.
He recently voted down some benefits for veterans. I'm sure that ought to be an interesting meeting. And it's just not right that somebody that supposedly represents your state doesn't spend any time.
Yeah. I do really wish that people would study up on these guys and actually do their research, you know, because what he'll do is he'll come into Idaho and he'll say, "Hey, I'm pro Second Amendment, and you know, I'm pro freedom, and I'm a patriot," and then, you know, people will give him their vote based on just that. But
well, one of the things that's got me a bug under my saddle, and I don't know if you're aware of this, a couple things actually. Number one, he's a never-Trumper to begin with. He pulled his support publicly for Donald J. Trump just before the 2016 election. If it were up to him, Donald Trump would have never been elected to office. That's not good. And more recently, he's been trying to roll back. He and Ron Wyden from Washington, I believe it is, they brought forth legislation to roll back the Chinese trade tariffs that Trump put in place. It's called Section 301, and that is an America Last policy. That hurts our businesses, our manufacturers, our labor force.
why do you suppose they do that?
Well, I just think that they're just part of the swamp, and if you're a never-Trumper and you have enough pressure on you from the other side, you do whatever you want, and you hope that the voters will forgive you. The vote last summer on the infrastructure bill was interesting because it was so far away from the election. He and Rich figure out they won't remember it by the time it rolls around. Well, my job is to remind them of that betrayal. More recently, they had another bundle of this green energy bill. What they call it, the Inflation Reduction Act. What a misnomer that is. And so Crapo and Risch vote against that because, you know, now they need the political cover. They're 90 days.
We need to say that we're anti-green energy.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Now we're not the ones spending on that green energy bill, but yet last summer they spent 3 times as much money on the same crap.
This is kind of the problem with these bills, man, because it's like you can't if you put a piece of legislation through that has something that you're completely opposed to, but then they'll attach something that is a heartstring puller. And then if you don't vote for it, then they call you a racist or a bigot or you hate veterans or, you know, whatever. It just seems like that's such a massive problem, just this adding on of these bills and just like...
Well, here's another example. The Farm Workers Act is something that comes up for renewal about every 10 years or so.
Right.
And let's face it, Idaho, the beautiful state of Idaho, I call it exceptional Idaho, is an ag state. Mm-hmm. We need ag. It's very important. But not at the expense of the average American and the taxpayer. So he's trying to promote this passage of this bill that basically gives amnesty instantly to 2 million illegal aliens in the United States just so they can work in the ag industry.
Yeah.
Now, how is that fair to the rest of us, the taxpayers? It's not. So I'm all for helping the ag industry, and I support them fully, but not at the expense of the rest of us and the taxpayers. Those farm workers, they have to have a program that allows them to come in under the systems already in place. We already allow over 1.1 million legal immigrants every year, more than any country in the world. But yet the media acts like we have closed borders and don't let anybody in. Right. It's not true at all.
Yeah, that's not what happens. If you watch the video of the border any time at all, you just see people walking across all the time.
And granting amnesty to the people that already broke the law is just rewarding them for having broken the law in the first place. Yeah. And it's a slap in the face to the people that stood in line. I don't like line jumpers. Try cutting in front of me at the post office or the Department of Motor Vehicles. I'm likely to say something. Hey, you, the back of the line's over here.
Isn't your number higher than mine?
Yes, something like that.
Yeah. So, you want a time limit for filibustering. I don't think people really fully understand what a filibuster is and how it works and why limiting the time would be beneficial.
Yeah, nobody understands it, Chris. It's okay.
Yeah.
it's okay. It's just a mechanism to prolong debate and to give the other side to make an argument. It's not a crucial item.
Yeah, but I mean, it must be because they just had an attempt to try and end it in the House and in the Senate. So I mean, it must be something. I mean, it's like the only mechanism that the Republicans have right now to slow things down.
Well,
right?
It's very typical when the Democrats are in power, they want to take away the clubs and tools that they just got done using when Trump was in power.
Yeah.
It's hypocritical. Everything that they do is hypocritical and of little surprise.
And very short-sighted too.
Yes.
I always tell people, it's like if you put something into play, don't be surprised when it's used against you in the future.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of confidence in the leadership of the Republican Party in Washington, D.C. Mitch McConnell, Kevin McCarthy, that whole bunch. This battle is playing out nationally. You saw it here in Idaho this year in the primary as well, where you have the traditional, cabal, the good old boy network, the secret handshake, kiss the ring kind of Republicans, versus what I call the liberty freedom candidates. And we had a great slate of candidates here in Idaho. Sadly, only one or two made it through, Raul Labrador being the one that comes to mind. But we did make inroads in the state Senate and a couple other races. But that battle is playing out all over. The liberty, freedom, Constitution-minded folks versus the entrenched, let's leave it the way it is because they're holding on to the political power. They control the purse strings. And no better example than Brad Little. Mm-hmm. This guy, it's unfortunate that we have the primary system that we have that allows a blue Republican like Brad Little to remain in office when he probably has no business being in office moving forward.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate.
Yeah, we'll see what happens with that.
Yes, we'll see.
What's interesting about that is I would have never thought in all of my time that Ammon would actually have a chance. Mm-hmm. But it turns out that the stars have aligned. There might be a potential,
Could be.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, we'll see. So when I researched the race and I looked at 30 years of election history, I decided to go, for my Crapo seat. I looked back and said, okay, first off, for the record, I was a lifelong Republican until 2 years ago. Died in the wool, pretty hardcore. But after the 2020 election and the lack of leadership or response for what, in my opinion, was a stolen election. Now, that'll probably get you banned on YouTube, so I hope this isn't going to just instantly, right? You'll be banned. You'll get a strike against you for having said that. It's interesting, and I'm looking at the race going, all right, in 30 years here in Idaho, had I re-registered as a Republican and run, I would have lost in the primary because you're not going to beat a 30-year incumbent, a 40-year incumbent in a primary. And 4 people tried that this year. They ran as Republicans against Crapo, and they got clobbered, each one of them individually. Now, collectively, the good news, Chris, is that group got 33% of the vote total. In other words, 33% of the registered Republicans
did not want to
rejected
vote for
my Crapo.
Yeah.
So now, as long as that group is made aware of my campaign as an independent, yes, but a true conservative, I'm not starting at zero. I don't know what the number is exactly, but it's not zero. And I can win the race with as little as 34% of the total come November 8th. So how does that path to victory look? Well, if I get 34% and Senator Mike Crapo gets 33%, your token Democrat in Idaho is going to get 30 to 32% tops. Let's give them 32 just to be optimistic for them. They're never going to, in any statewide race, they have never gotten more than 32%.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're pretty generous with that.
Well, that's what they get, though. Even a weak candidate will get 30 to 32%, but never more. There's just not enough numbers here. Yeah. And then that leaves 1% for your fringe candidates, the Libertarian, the Constitution Party. So my path to victory is not an easy one. I'm not making it sound like it is. But
mathematically, it's possible.
Absolutely, and it's true for Bundy also. And I've been traveling the state since November, and everywhere I go, when I bring up who my opponent is, about 85% of them say, "Oh yeah, he's got to go. Too much time in there. He's just another career politician that's beholden to lobbyists, and his time has come." Now, why he's even running? I saw an article in the Idaho Press Tribune or somewhere here back in January, something like that. And his answer was, why am I running again? I basically have nothing to do besides this. So that's hardly a reason to send a senator back to Washington.
Yeah.
Why don't you take up golf or go spend some time with your grandkids?
Yeah, I mean, obviously he's had enough time to make enough money to be able to just retire, right?
I've heard him on the campaign trail explain his infrastructure vote, try to explain it. And, I'm just not buying that argument. He says, well, I got to get back to Washington to finish what I've started. And my wife and I are sitting there going, no, please, God, don't go finish what you started. We're already at $30.5 trillion. Why don't you take a break?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking about our congregation and, the few hundred people that I can think of right off the top of my head, and in thinking about, how they're looking at voting and what they're wanting to see, one of the things that they're just like, they're done with is just the printing of money. I mean, the $4 trillion in 18 months, and the fact that we have a legislature that's just willing to just continue to approve this ridiculous spending that we don't have the money to do. We just keep printing this money.
Yes.
And obviously inflation just keeps going up because we're printing money. It has nothing to do with Putin.
Yeah.
It's just we're printing money. That's what it boils down to.
I hate to sound like such a cynic, but if you really know what's going on, Washington, D.C. has just it's evolved into this giant taxpayer-funded money laundering operation.
Yeah.
And both major parties are guilty of it. The Republicans have their cronies they like to fling money at, and the Democrats, they fling money at the green energy crowd or whatever else happens to be hip, the tech sector. And who's picking up the tab for that? It is the taxpayers. I love it when they call it ARPA money or COVID money or some other such nonsense.
Yeah.
Those are taxpayers' dollars, and they should be treated just like the tithes at your church. As sacred dollars. I bet you don't waste a dime around here because where did it come from? A parishioner.
And everything's 100% transparent too.
Yeah, and that is not how Washington works these days. And it's the reason they don't mind racking up the debt or printing money. It's because they're not the ones paying the bill at the end of the month.
Yeah, and I think that's what a lot of conservatives are really just tired of, because I think at the heart, conservatives are not only, freedom and conservative values, they're fiscal conservatives.
Absolutely, as am I. I'm in the financial services business. I know how money and taxes work.
Yeah, and it's like why are we? I mean, it's like we just keep getting credit cards, and we just keep racking up the debt, and then we're paying for it.
Well, I'm making a big ask of the voters of Idaho, and I get that, and so my ask is, if you want a true conservative. Since these guys, you're not going to beat them in the primary. I'm running as an independent. Now, the good news, you don't have to switch parties. Anybody can vote for anybody in the general election. You'll see my name on the ballot. There's only 5 people there. But I fully understand that I am asking people, many people, maybe for the first time in their lives, to flip the switch for an independent candidate, and that's no small feat.
Yeah.
But I think it's high time, Chris, that the voters are willing to put their country before their party, because we're not going to solve the problems the way we've been doing it. Yeah. One of my favorite quotes is from Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein said, "The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results." And that is what we're doing when we keep sending career politicians, either at a state or a federal level, back to the same. We're guilty of it. We're the ones that sent them there, and then we give them the lowest ratings ever that Congress has ever had, and we have to change that mindset. So that's what I'm about.
It's funny, isn't it, that we'll just keep sending the same people back, and then we'll just sit there and complain because they are doing terrible things, but then we'll just send them back the next time they come up for election.
Yeah, but think about this. For the first time in about 18 years, the voters of Idaho are going to have a choice beside the following. For the last 18 years, excuse me, it's been the Democrat or Crapo. Well, that'd be an easy one for me, right?
Yeah.
Not this time around. Now you're going to have the Democrat light, or a true conservative named Scott Cleveland.
Do you think there's a tidal shift in the two-party system? Do you think that people are really leaning towards creating a third party?
Well, I don't know about a third party, but there's quite a few independent voters now, and there's not an independent party per se. There are 4 parties: the Republicans, the Democrats, the Constitution Party, and the Libertarians. And then the fifth one, if there is such a thing, is just called unaffiliated. Now, people tend to call it the independent, which I do as well, but it's not a party. We don't have any rules. We don't have a convention. We don't have any meetings or anything like that.
Kind of like just a political identification.
But nearly 1/3 of the voters in the state of Idaho are unaffiliated independent. And that number is going up, not down.
Yeah.
Because of the two-party system.
Is it just people are getting sick of the two-party, kind of struggle, the polarization of our politics.
Absolutely. I hear it all over the state, everywhere I go. And people are proud to say, "Well, I'm an independent, anyways." When I describe, what my path to victory is, and for people that aren't aware, there are many independents. You don't see a lot of them at the federal level, but there's a lot of independents at a state level all across the country. So it's not like a unicorn event or a black swan. You can get to office as an independent, and that's what I'm going to do. It's the only possible path to victory.
Yeah, yeah. And it's the only way to get these career politicians out, basically, because they're just going to keep running until they're dead, pretty much, is what it seems like. So you think that you could do a lot of difference in the federal government, and we've talked about some of the problems and stuff, but you see like some of these committees as a tool to be able to make change?
Sure.
So you mentioned a couple that you'd really like to be a part of, the Appropriations Committee. What would you do in that to affect change?
Well, ultimately, sadly, besides God, other things boil down to God and money, it seems, in our modern world. And on the Appropriations Committee, it's the power of the purse. I mean, that's what the framers had in mind. The legislative body controls the purse strings,
right?
Not the judicial branch, not the executive branch. And so I think you could have a lot of power there. And again, as I mentioned, even though I would be one of 100 senators, there's a lot of power in that, especially when you have a very balanced, very close voting system like we have right now. I think that we spend money. America is the richest country in the world by far. It's not even close. We have enough revenue, tax revenue, and natural resources to cover our needs and then some. The problem is not the money in, like an accountant will tell you, money in, money out.
Right.
The problem is not the money in. There's plenty of it. It's where we're spending our money. We're spending our money on social programs and a bunch of nonsense. I can't think of a better example than the hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars being sent halfway across the globe to the Ukrainians, one of the most corrupt political systems in the world, because of this evil bad man Putin has invaded their border and there's a war going on. I can't think of a better example of what should not be happening in this country than that nonsense.
Yeah.
And yet it goes through and nobody raises a fuss about it, and the Republicans turn a blind eye to it.
Yeah.
You hear nothing about them screeching about this overspending on that or the border invasion or energy independence, because they're part of the political elite structure. And you know what? They're okay with the status quo.
Yeah. Do you think, like in that Ukraine thing, there was room to do like some benevolence, like to help out with the people that were struggling over there? Or do you think we should have just like stayed out completely?
We need to stay out of it. I mean, there are people all over the world, including in Europe. It's their back door. Why aren't they stepping up to help solve the problem?
Yeah.
Why does American taxpayers have to be the first resource that everybody, when there's a crisis, a worldwide crisis, either manufactured or otherwise, they're sticking their hand out and they're trying to be over here milking the United States taxpayer? I think it's ridiculous. It needs to stop.
Yeah, and in reality, shouldn't that be the province of the like nonprofits to be able to do those things?
There's lots
plenty
of ways.
of charities to handle
There's
that.
Lots of ways to help other people. We don't need to be fighting these foreign wars. I've been working at the North Idaho State Fair. I know them not to call it Northern Idaho State Fair. I've been schooled on that, and every once in a while it slips. You know, do not
for the
do
record,
do not call it Northern Idaho. You'll be slapped.
Yeah,
it's North, and so I've been working at the North Idaho State Fair for the last 3 days straight. I'll be there another 2 days.
Nice,
and then we have to boogie back down to the Treasure Valley to work the final 5 days at the Western Idaho State Fair. And so we're happy to do that. But I talk to a lot of veterans, and, they ask me about veterans issues all the time. And I say, well, my position is, my father is a veteran. My grandfather before him was a veteran. And the best thing we could do for veterans groups is not to send our finest young men and women off to some foreign soil to die or be maimed for what?
Yeah.
We need to stay out of being the world's police force. And if it's not a direct national security threat to here in the homeland, we need to stay out of these conflicts. Look at the cost of blood and treasure that we've gone through in the last 25 years. It is despicable. Think of where we would be as a country if we hadn't done that.
Yeah. I want to ask you about something a little off, like just switching gears a little bit.
Sure, switch gears on me. I'm ready for it.
You're opposed to marijuana. That's stated.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find that whole issue is should that be a federal issue, or should that be a state issue? Because right now, it's a federal issue.
Yeah, the federal government has said that these are, Class 1 drugs or whatever, marijuana, cocaine, heroin, and so on. I think it should be left up to the states. I think 25 states have passed marijuana legalization, and I don't think Idaho should join that list, not in any way, shape, or form. I've been to some of those states. I'm from New Mexico. They just legalized marijuana as if New Mexico didn't have enough problems to begin with. Now you got all these junkies and zombies walking around. I was there 3 weeks ago to visit family and to have a little fundraiser. And every year I go back once a summer to see family. Every single year I go there, it's worse. The city of Albuquerque is like one big episode of Breaking Bad. I love New Mexico. I love Albuquerque, right? It's not the people, right? But it's like one big episode of Breaking Bad. The homeless people, it's worse than Los Angeles.
Wow.
It is
now
disgusting.
That's saying something.
It is, and it doesn't have to be that way. But when you have Democrats running state, county, and city government, and they turn a blind eye to it, and then you throw in the weed and all that goes with that, it is disgusting, and I don't want to see one bit of that coming here to Idaho. You want to smoke dope that bad? Just go move to one of the dope states. There's plenty of them. We're surrounded by them. Yeah,
I get it. I hear that argument a lot, but one of the things that I think people do want to hear is that it is a state issue, and
it is.
I would love to see the authority and power turned back over to the states, and the federal government abandon the billions of dollars that they spend policing these things that they shouldn't even be involved with.
Well, what happens these days is the federal government comes up with these taxpayer dollars. They don't call them taxpayer dollars. They say, we have these monies, ARPA, COVID money, what have you. And they conduct financial extortion on the state governors and the state houses to say, hey, we'll give you $300 million for your school system, or $1.5 billion for your police program, but you got to sign this memorandum of understanding that says you will teach CRT in your schools, you will do this.
They tie it all together. They interlace it.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not something for nothing. It's we want you to work these progressive ideas into your programs, and if you don't get the money. Well, what do the governors and the state houses do? They say, just sign that form. It's just paperwork. Give us the money, because, boy, we can really use that money.
Well, that's what Little does for sure.
Absolutely he does. Yeah. Now, they tried that down in New Mexico, and the state legislature, which is Democrats, had to sue the Democrat governor, Wuhan Lujan is her name, and they had to sue her to stop her from spending.
There's that knack for naming.
Yes, again. Wuhan Lujan. My dad came up with that one. Thanks, Tom. I'll give credit where credit's due. I go, how's it going down there, Dad? He goes, well, son, all I can tell you is we started calling her Wuhan Lujan. I said, that's pretty good. But they had to sue her to get her to stop spending this money willy-nilly, lining the pockets of all of her cronies. And luckily, I think they stopped her before she spent the final $500 million.
Wow.
But what happened here in Idaho? Nobody stopped Brad Little from doing anything. Who knows where all this money went? And now we have, a $2 billion surplus? You heard this nonsense?
Yeah.
A $2 billion surplus, and he wants to give it to the Reclaim Idaho group.
Yeah, the whole school thing.
It's just insane. There is some good news, though. On the way over here, I heard the good news. Dr. Fauci is going to ride off into retirement finally.
Hallelujah.
After the damage he's done with COVID, the mishandling of that situation.
But wait, Scott, there was
Yes.
no gain of function research.
Yes. Well,
There was none of that. Come on,
well,
Scott.
Well, he'll never be held accountable. They get a
Nope.
free pass, but he
Nope.
did announce his retirement today, I believe, and that's good.
That's good news.
But no, hey, right around the corner, you got me on a roll here. The caffeine's kicking in now. Monkeypox, right?
Yeah, we got monkeypox coming up.
So about.
We're going to have a quote unquote vaccine for that one as well.
I got a better idea. So I was at D&B Supply, local hardware place there in Garden City about 6 weeks ago. And there was a scrawny looking little plant about a foot tall. It looked like it was half dead, but it was a banana tree. So I purchased that banana tree and took it to the office. My wife says, "What the heck is that scrawny looking half dead plant?" I said, "That's a banana tree." And she goes, "Well, why do we need a banana tree anyhow?" I said, "Monkeypox."
Yeah, we got monkeypox.
If monkeypox gets out of hand, I want to be on good terms with the doggone monkeys. That's forward thinking. Don't you want forward thinking in your state senator?
Yeah.
All right, there you go.
Does that mean we're going to get federally funded banana trees to
Probably.
everyone?
There's probably a banana seed tree program going on in its incubator state as we speak. So.
Oh man. Well, so last thing I want to talk about is we got the whole thing, and I'll give you the last word. But
Sure.
Last thing is the whole gun control thing that's happening right now in our federal government, and them wanting to pass gun control legislation. Yes. And I've already talked to quite a few of our legislatures, right. And they're all pretty confident that Idaho is going to pass its own legislation to just tell the federal government to go pound sand. But how do you go about being a proponent of just saying hey, we're here to defend those things, not to regulate them?
Yes, we don't.
That would be the only right that's listed in the Bill of Rights that would actually have legislation to limit it.
Well, the Bill of Rights is very, very important, and the Second Amendment in particular shall not be infringed. I mean, I draw a hard stop right there. And the gun grabbers, they're never going to stop trying to come for our guns and put restrictions on them. I'm having none of that. And in the spirit of Northern Idaho, how do you like my camouflage hat?
I like it, man.
Here?
I like the FedEx truck with the cannon on top.
No, if you look really carefully, it says LEDX, not FedEx, LEDX, and that is, for the record, a 50 cal on top of the LEDX truck there.
Nice.
So those are kind of my positions on the Second Amendment. We shouldn't be messing with something. The only reason that our country is going to remain a free people is because of the Second Amendment. You look back to COVID and look at what happened to the citizens of Australia, New Zealand, the UK, and our neighbors up north in Canada. Look how those people were oppressed and violently beaten down by their own police forces and government agencies.
The stuff that was coming out of Australia was abysmal.
I saw that video. I was disgusted. It made my stomach turn. And those people were defenseless. And don't think for 1 second that the people in Washington, D.C. wouldn't be doing that to you and I if they had a half a chance.
Yeah.
And it's never going to, people are never going to give up their guns in the United States.
They're building up their army, though. They just hired 87,000 more IRS agents and armed them with $10 million worth of armament.
Yeah.
So.
They didn't have the budget to hire 87,000 Border Patrol agents, but they did hire 87,000 IRS agents.
IRS is now like 4 times larger than Border Patrol.
Yeah,
it's gross.
It just shows you where their priorities lie, and they're not coming after the Democrats with those IRS agents. They're gonna, if you're a conservative, you are on their target list, and that's the way they're gonna make your life miserable.
If you voted for Trump, get ready for an audit.
Yeah, you're an insurrectionist. I'm so tired of all that. That's why I'm running for office. I've had it up to here. And there's, you can sit around and complain about it.
Or you can do something.
Or you can get involved.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm doing. So a couple quick things it sounds like we're winding up.
Go ahead and take the last word.
I got a quick plug for a speaking event tomorrow night, Tuesday the 23rd. I'll be doing a public speech down at the Culinary Stone down in Coeur d'Alene. It's kind of in the Riverstone district, wherever that is. It's from 6 till 8 p.m. Everybody's welcome to come hear my spiel if they're in town. And I will be at the fair for another couple days, and then the volunteers will be taking over there. But I know I'm asking a lot of people to vote for an independent conservative. We say it all in one breath, but again, I come back to it's high time we put our country before our party if we're going to turn things around.
Yeah, amen to that. Amen to that.
And thank you for inviting me on your show. I've enjoyed it.
Man, thank you, Scott, man, for coming in. We really appreciate it. And we'll after the general election, we'll get in touch with you and see if we can get an update on how things are going.
Sounds good. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man, I really do appreciate it. Well, that about does it for us today. As always, thank you for joining us. If you have any ideas for an episode that you'd like to see or any guests that you'd like for us to investigate, you can email us at 3p@athelbaptistchurch.org. If you've enjoyed this episode, make sure that you like and share it. Share it with your friends. Subscribe also so you don't miss any future episodes. Hit that bell. Thank you for everyone that helped us produce this episode. I can't thank Ken and Greg because they're slacking off this week, but I can thank Gavin. So thank you, Gavin, for helping us produce this episode. Thank you, Athel Baptist Church and its members for their generous support of this ministry. And again, thank you for listening. And until next time, remember, be brave, be bold, be loud. You could be a force for biblical morality in your world. Don't wait, don't be silent, and never, ever, ever give up. And with that, we are out.